This thrilling story begins with a character named Mike, an author who neither believed in ghosts nor in God. It was a time when people doubted whether such things were even real, but Mike had a deep fascination with researching paranormal activities. He wrote extensively about these subjects in his books, which made his works quite famous, and he himself became popular. However, despite his success, Mike had never encountered anything that made him believe in ghosts or God. A few years ago, Mike's daughter passed away under mysterious circumstances, which devastated him. The grief shook him to his core, and in his distress, he divorced his wife. Since then, Mike had been living alone, continuously exploring these phenomena. Researching paranormal activities became his work, and he would travel to different places, document his findings, and write them in his books, which people loved. This made him quite wealthy, but Mike's main goal was to witness actual paranormal activities so that he could connect with the world of spirits and communicate with his deceased daughter. However, he had never had such an experience yet, although he was determined to keep trying. Mike only believed in what he had seen with his own eyes, and he knew he would eventually discover whether God or ghosts existed. For his latest research, Mike decided to visit a hotel named Dolphin. This hotel had 14 floors and was quite luxurious. Mike checked into his room, unpacked, and then headed to the beach to go surfing. As he surfed, Mike was enjoying himself, but at one moment, he found himself drowning and experiencing a near-death moment for the first time. He truly believed he was going to die, but the waves soon washed him ashore, and after a while, he regained consciousness. Later, back at his hotel, Mike was reading some news about the Dolphin Hotel and came across a warning. The article clearly stated that no one should ever enter room 1408, as anyone who had ever entered that room had never returned alive. People believed that paranormal activities occurred in that room, and many evil spirits were said to reside there. All of this excited Mike even more. He was now determined to witness these paranormal activities at any cost. So he went to the receptionist and asked to change his room. Mike specifically booked room 1408. When a manager named Lynn found out, he approached Mike before handing over the room key and had a conversation with him. Lynn informed Mike that no one who had entered that room had ever returned alive. Some had committed suicide, while many others had simply disappeared. But Mike was absolutely sure that he had to see this room because he wanted to experience paranormal activities with his own eyes and find out if all of this was real or not. Despite Lynn's warnings, Mike was adamant, and Lynn eventually gave in, offering a final warning that no one had ever lasted more than an hour inside that room. However, Mike, full of confidence, asked for the key. Lynn reluctantly handed it over, and Mike, without hesitation, took the key and headed straight for room 1408. Standing in front of the door, Mike inserted the key and opened it. He slowly stepped inside, surrounded by complete darkness. But at this point, Mike wasn't scared at all since he had yet to see any ghosts or spirits. He quickly turned on the lights, and the whole room became visible. However, at that moment, the door suddenly slammed shut on its own and wouldn't open, no matter how hard Mike tried. Giving up on the door, Mike moved further into the room, unaware that entering this room was the biggest mistake he had ever made. As he ventured deeper, he began to have strange visions and found several bloodstains. There were even dead bodies scattered around. When the rescuers had learned about this room, they had been too terrified to enter. Mike was now completely clueless about what to do next since all the doors were sealed shut. How would he even escape from this room? It is then revealed that this entire story is inspired by a book called The Divine Comedy, which explains how a person's soul must journey from hell to heaven after death. Along the way, they face the consequences of both the good and bad deeds they committed during their life. The journey Mike was about to undertake followed the terrifying concept of passing through the 9 circles of hell. In order to reach heaven, he would have to face these layers one by one. This was based on the idea described in The Divine Comedy, where a soul must traverse these circles after death. It is now revealed that when Mike was surfing, he actually drowned in the water, and that was the moment he died. Ever since, he had been trapped in the realms of hell, facing the various stages leading up to this terrifying ordeal. All the horrifying experiences Mike was going through were part of the process of crossing the 9 layers of hell. As Mike became more trapped in a room, it seemed like the first phase of this journey was about to begin. He started hearing the voice of a woman from the neighboring room calling out to him. The voice kept growing louder, so Mike screamed for help. However, the woman in the next room didn't seem to notice him. Desperate, Mike slowly opened the window to climb out and escape. Since he was on the top floor, the wind outside was extremely strong, making every step dangerous. One wrong move, and he would fall to his death. As the pressure from the wind grew stronger, Mike struggled to hold on. Suddenly, he saw a figure in the other window, a large woman with a transparent body. At that moment, Mike realized she was a spirit trying to deceive him. For the first time, Mike witnessed a spirit in real life, and he was completely shocked. Though he had written about many spirits and ghosts in his books, he had never actually seen one. Now, he was face to face with a dangerous entity. The spirit jumped out of the window and vanished instantly. At this point, the window Mike was clinging to began to close slowly. He rushed back inside just in time. If he had remained outside a moment longer, all possible exits to the room would have been sealed, and he would have been trapped for good. Mike seemed to be losing the battle in the first phase of his hellish journey, sealing his fate to remain trapped forever. He was completely bewildered, unaware that he was utterly ensnared by the consequences of his past actions. The story delves into Mike's character, revealing his overwhelming greed and selfishness. He had always prioritized himself over others, even abandoning his wife when their daughter died, despite her needing him the most. Mike maintained a relationship with his father solely to inherit his properties after his passing. He was also a severe alcoholic, squandering all his money on drinks instead of providing for his family. This relentless greed and selfishness were now manifesting in the punishment Mike faced in the eerie room. As he traveled through a haunting space, he came across a flooded floor and a moving picture frame of a boat that seemed impossibly real. Intrigued yet confused, he approached it to satisfy his curiosity. However, the moment he got closer, the frame shattered, unleashing a torrent of water that engulfed the room. As Mike struggled to stay afloat, he realized that the flood was a direct reflection of his past experiences and the greed he harbored. Frantically, Mike called the receptionist, demanding to be let out. But to his dismay, the phone call never connected. Now, for the first time, he was forced to confront the reality of the supernatural, which he had always dismissed. In a fit of rage, he began to scream, feeling completely trapped as all possible exits were closed off. The horror of his situation sank in, and he was left alone to grapple with the consequences of his choices. Mike's inner turmoil had transformed him into a destructive force. When angered, he would lash out at those around him or even inflict harm upon himself. His faith in God had crumbled completely after the tragic loss of his daughter. Once a devoted believer who prayed regularly, Mike now viewed God with contempt, convinced that divine intervention was a myth. This shift in his belief system, rooted in the trauma of his daughter's unexpected death, marked the beginning of his downward spiral into despair. As he navigated through his torment, the temperature in the room began to rise drastically. The heat was unbearable, causing everything around him to melt, reminiscent of a scorching desert. Mike realized the severity of his situation, feeling as if he were burning alive. His mind struggled to function under the extreme conditions, and he feared he would succumb to this hellish heat. Just as he reached his breaking point, the temperature suddenly returned to normal, indicating that he had passed through another phase of his hellish ordeal. The narrative turned to reveal that Mike was a fraud. Although he had never deceived anyone directly, he failed to live by the principles he preached in his books. He wrote about the paranormal, yet never truly believed in it himself, effectively misleading his audience into thinking they were experiencing reality. This hypocrisy was rooted in his need for financial gain, crafting tales that enthralled readers despite lacking any authenticity. Mike's reputation as a popular author had shielded him until now, but this sanctuary was about to crumble. Suddenly, he noticed a masked figure emerging, attacking him with a sword and other weapons. This relentless assailant moved with a supernatural speed, appearing in one spot and disappearing in another. Mike instinctively fled, narrowly avoiding the blows aimed at him. The situation was dire, but it was a reflection of his own deceitful past, a consequence of the lies he had spun and the truth he had avoided. As Mike ran, he couldn't help but realize that every step he took was a part of the reckoning he so desperately tried to escape. The masked figure symbolized his guilt and the darkness that had followed him, unrelenting in its pursuit. He was trapped in a nightmare of his own making, and there would be no easy way out. Mike was tormented relentlessly by the unknown spirit, who used various weapons to leave painful marks on his body. Each strike intensified his fear and agony, and when he glanced up again, the spirit had vanished. The level of pain and dread he experienced was unlike anything he'd felt before. This experience began to chip away at his skepticism. He started to believe that the paranormal activities he had only written about were indeed real, as he had witnessed them firsthand. However, worse events were yet to unfold for Mike. He reflected on his betrayal of his wife after their daughter's tragic death. He had so easily abandoned her during a time of crisis, when she needed him the most. His selfishness, driven by his grief, had severed their bond, leaving his wife alone to navigate the storm of sorrow. As he grappled with these thoughts, the temperature in the room began to plummet. Soon, everything around him was encased in ice, and he felt an unbearable chill seep into his bones. Shivering uncontrollably, Mike sought warmth under a blanket, but it did little to help. His body went numb, and he was unable to move, effectively freezing beneath the weight of his own regrets. This chilling phase served as a punishment for his betrayal. If only he had supported his wife, perhaps he wouldn't be enduring such suffering now. Eventually, the extreme cold overwhelmed him, and he slipped into unconsciousness, becoming completely enveloped in the icy grip of despair. As the room's temperature normalized, Mike prepared to face the next phase of his torment, a reckoning that required him to abandon all worldly attachments. He had to sever ties with everyone he had ever known, a painful process of letting go that he had avoided for far too long. He believed that by doing so, he would find a way out of this nightmare. Just as he thought he was close to freedom, the room was suddenly filled with several shadowy figures. They wreaked havoc, destroying everything in sight, and their chaotic presence inflicted a deep sense of pain within Mike. Confused and terrified, he struggled to comprehend the situation. With no apparent exit from the room, he wondered how these entities had infiltrated his space. It soon dawned on him that these were spirits, embodiments of his guilt and regret, come to torment him further. Each of them represented a relationship he had failed, a promise he had broken, and a moment of weakness that had led him here. Their presence was a haunting reminder of his past choices, forcing him to confront the consequences of his actions. In this hellish landscape, Mike realized he could no longer escape the truth he had been evading for so long. Mike was screaming at the top of his lungs, desperately calling out for help as visions of how he had entered this room flooded back. He had faced numerous hardships to reach this point, but exhaustion was beginning to take its toll. "Please, get me out of here," he cried, begging even the notion of God for assistance. Suddenly, an eerie silence enveloped the space. In the next moment, Mike noticed a door behind him. When he cautiously opened it, voices of men serving their punishments echoed from within. A chill ran down his spine as he realized that if he didn't act soon, he would end up like them, trapped in hell. He did not want that fate. As he turned to look the other way, he was taken aback to see his daughter standing before him. Emotions surged within him, as this was everything he had been longing for. His daughter rushed to him, and he enveloped her in a warm embrace, believing she had somehow returned to him. For a fleeting moment, he forgot he was dead and believed he was on his way from hell to heaven, reuniting with her. However, in an instant, his daughter suddenly faded away, her body transforming into ashes right before his eyes. The harsh reality struck Mike. This was a cruel illusion, and he was being ensnared further into a trap. Rage consumed him as he grabbed various weapons scattered around and began to destroy everything in sight. He smashed objects, unleashing his pent-up frustration and grief. Eventually, he grew weary, his energy spent, and he collapsed, losing consciousness. In his hazy state, he noticed a timer ticking down beside him, nearing its end. Just as the timer hit 0, a new one activated. The room transformed back to its normal state as if nothing had happened at all, and Mike found himself back in the same situation he faced when he first entered. Initially, all of Mike's decisions had been fueled by anger and impulsiveness. But this time, he felt a shift within himself. With a calm demeanor, he began to assess his surroundings. He took a deep breath, determined to approach this situation differently. Patience settled in as he sought to understand the lessons presented to him. As he reflected on his past choices and the emotional turmoil he had endured, he realized he needed to confront his feelings and take responsibility for his actions. This journey wasn't just about escaping hell, it was about confronting his demons and seeking redemption for his past mistakes. Mike understood that the true battle lay not in the physical destruction of his surroundings, but in the internal struggle to come to terms with his grief, guilt, and regret. With newfound clarity, Mike resolved to navigate this phase with intention and wisdom, prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead in his quest for salvation. Mike felt an overwhelming pressure in the room, as if it was coercing him into suicide. A noose appeared ominously, suggesting an easy escape from his torment. Around him lay the lifeless bodies of others, their spirits lingering, trapped like him in this hellish place. They had seen no other way out and had taken their lives, but Mike refused to share their fate. He understood that this room was a manifestation of hell, where souls were imprisoned, and he would not succumb to its dark influence. Determined, Mike dismissed the suicidal thoughts and focused on how to escape. He needed to communicate to the outside world that he was trapped. Sitting on a nearby sofa, he pulled out a bottle of liquor, contemplating whether to drink it again. Instead, he set the bottle on fire, allowing the flames to spread throughout the room. He hoped that by igniting the entire hotel, someone would notice the smoke and rescue him. As the fire engulfed the room, Mike felt the heat searing his skin. But he was willing to endure the pain for a chance at freedom. Within moments, the alarm triggered and firefighters arrived, rushing into the blazing inferno to save him. Relief washed over Mike as he realized he might finally escape. However, he noticed the number 7 written on the helmets of the firefighters. The realization hit him. He had reached level 7 of his ordeal, signaling he was close to heaven. Encouraged, he asked the firefighters if they were all right, and with their assistance, he made his way out of the flames. Once outside, Mike was taken to the hospital for treatment. There, he was reunited with his wife, and they shared heartfelt conversations, rekindling the love they once had. After months of healing and recuperation, Mike and his wife worked hard to rebuild their lives, accumulating wealth and finally purchasing a beautiful house. They painted their new home entirely white, transforming it into a paradise of sorts, a stark contrast to the darkness he had faced. This house symbolized their fresh start and a new chapter in their lives, filled with hope and a deeper understanding of their love for each other. Mike had triumphed over his demons, and together, they embraced the future, grateful for the second chance they had been given. Mike was determined to transform his new home into a paradise, a sanctuary that reflected the joy and peace he had found after his harrowing experiences. As he and his wife unpacked their belongings, Mike couldn't shake the memories of what he had been through. He felt a disconnect between those emotions and the reality he was now living in, so he decided to record his thoughts. To his shock, when he played back the tape recorder, he heard the familiar voice of his daughter trying to communicate with him. This realization struck him deeply. It confirmed that everything he had experienced was real. He had faced unimaginable darkness, but now he had the chance to embrace the light. In the wake of this revelation, Mike vowed to change his life. He cut off all negative habits and focused on building a loving relationship with his wife. He stopped writing his books on paranormal activities, choosing instead to prioritize trust and honesty in his relationships. He even donated all his father's properties, choosing to earn his own living rather than relying on inherited wealth. With these changes, Mike and his wife settled into their little slice of heaven, finding happiness in the simplicity of their life together. They cherished each moment, grateful for the second chance they had been given. Little did Mike know that this newfound happiness was a result of his hard-earned lessons. As their adventure came to a close, Mike reflected on how lucky he was to have this opportunity to make things right. The journey had been tough, but it had shaped him into a better person. And so, our adventurous story ends here.